Wow, I have to follow that? I mean, I feel like we should just pray and go home at this point. I mean, I like when the band does every song I know just in one song. That makes it pretty easy just to knock them all out at one point. So, as I'm sitting in the back thinking, okay, I gotta come out after the next song, and I'm like, well, wait, I don't even know what the next song is because they haven't stopped the first song yet. So, anyway. Well, my name's Brandon. Welcome to 155. I know we got a lot of new faces in the house tonight, so I was happy to see that. So, my name is Brandon Keller. I am the youth director here. No, I am not a pastor. I'm just some guy that somehow they doesn't have a microphone. But welcome. Tonight we are wrapping up our Share series. This will be our third week of our Share series. Share series, that's hard to say. Share series. And so tonight I get the privilege of wrapping this whole thing up. And so let's kind of recap what we've done so far. So the first week I started this thing, I taught you 3 things that you needed to reach the lost. Does anybody remember what any of those 3 things were? You need compassion, you need effort, and what was the green eggs and ham thing? Persistence. That's right, I read the entire book of Green Eggs and Ham to try to show you guys the persistence that's required sometimes to pursue your friends and teach them about God. And then last week, Chris and Emily did a bang-up job on covering what they called the social revolution. And really that was all about, sharing the message and being a godly influence, but also online. And so some of the key points they taught us were God commands us to use social media for His glory, and that you will stand before God one day and be judged for your actions, including what you do on social media. And you can use social media either as a tool for good or righteousness, or for evil, depending on how you choose to use it. So they did a great job on that. We also got to hear Miss Courtney Thor's testimony last week, which was fantastic. And so tonight, I get the privilege of just kind of wrapping this whole thing up. And this whole series that we've been doing on Share is really based on one paragraph in the Bible that's known as the Great Commission. And the Great Commission is Matthew 28:18. It starts and it says, Jesus came and told His disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And so this was Jesus, what they call the Great Commission. This is Him, kind of His last time that He spends with His disciples. The most important thing He tells them is, great, you've done a great job, now go out and tell people about me. So that's what this whole Share series is all about, is based on the Great Commission. And so while we talked about kind of how to reach people and how to use social media, tonight I want to touch on something that's going to be a little bit more personable for you. And so tonight I want to ask you, what's your story? That's tonight's message, is what's your story? And so tonight we're going to talk about your testimony. Now, if you're new in church, or maybe you're not quite sure, even if you've been here for a while, you're like, what in the world is a testimony? That's kind of a big churchy word. And yes, it is kind of a big churchy word. Usually people don't use the word testimony unless they're in a church. Really, a testimony is really just kind of your story. And in church terms, it's usually your story of how you became to know Jesus. And so tonight we're going to talk about what is a testimony, what does a testimony look like, and I want to teach you guys in a practical and easy way how to write your own testimony so that you'll be ready someday to give your testimony if necessary. And really what people say is that you should be able to give your personal testimony and tell somebody your personal testimony in about 3 to 5 minutes. And the reason they say that is because, honestly, can you ever keep anybody's attention longer than about 3 to 5 minutes nowadays, right? People are like, squirrel, right? I mean, so really 3 to 5 minutes is about all the time you really get. So maybe even you're just walking to class with somebody, so you get that 3 minutes between class, you can kind of talk to somebody. That's your 3 to 5 minutes. In the business world, a lot of times they refer to that as your elevator speech, which is, if you got in an elevator with somebody, you have about the time it takes to go up the floor to tell that person what you do, what your company does, make a sales pitch if necessary, whatever. They call that an elevator speech. But here we're going to talk about it as your testimony, and doing that in about 3 to 5 minutes. And now, obviously, if time allows, you're going to spend as much time as necessary talking to somebody and telling them your story. But 3 to 5 minutes is pretty fair, and honestly, you should be able to knock it down that short anyway. So, tonight, what is your story? So, who was here this morning and heard Miss Shelley's awesome testimony that she gave this morning? That was awesome. That is a brave woman to stand up in front of nearly 600 people this morning and tell a story like that, you know, obviously very touching, you know, fit the message, absolutely fantastic. I don't know how Miss Shelley and Miss Chesney worked that together. It was definitely a God thing, I think. When I was talking to Miss Shelley earlier, that the testimony perfectly aligned with Chesney's message and everything, but it's so important to be able to tell your story. And I think you could see as I was working in the sound booth this morning, her story affecting people in the audience, because while her story didn't touch everybody in the same way, it definitely touched people in the audience of what they heard and how they may have to deal with something or may have to deal with something in the future. So your testimony is so important to be able to do that. So tonight, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk through the steps of preparing your own testimony. And while we do that, I'm going to kind of share my testimony as we go to kind of use as the example. So you'll learn a little bit about me, and then also learn kind of as an example for each point what that means. So, verse 1, number 1 on your outline. What was my life like before Jesus? What was my life like before Jesus? And this is really where we need to get with people and really kind of explain our story in a way that they understand. Now, if you're new to church, this part's probably pretty easy because it's still pretty fresh in your mind, and really you haven't been completely kind of indoctrinated into church language and stuff. If you've been in the church a while, you have to be a little bit careful because you don't want to use like huge words like unrighteousness and, you know, and sinner, and you got to be careful about the wording you use as you explain your previous life, because you could lose somebody pretty fast explaining your story if you use kind of big churchy type words. So explain it in a way that might be relatable to them. And so some examples are, you know, was there a specific problem or situation you were dealing with? Where did you find your happiness or security? You know, if you're thinking about, you know, what was I doing before I was a Christian maybe? You know, where did you find happiness or security? Were you searching for something? Did you feel like something was missing in your life? You know, maybe you can explain that to them. And then, you know, if you had kind of your inner needs of, you felt like you needed to do something, kind of explain that. How did you satisfy those? What were you doing in order to satisfy some of those needs? And so, what you need to do though is you need to give specific examples in your life of, I was doing this, but you need to be careful about not over-sensationalizing kind of your dirty past of what you might have been doing, because you got to remember the whole idea here is you want to show somebody why Jesus is important. So if Danny's given me his testimony, he shouldn't tell me a 10-minute story about the time he got drunk and it was so fun and all the great time he had, because that kind of ruins it for me. I'm thinking, well, getting drunk sounds fun, right? So he needs to keep it short and go, you know, I used to do this, and now I've realized. So don't over-sensationalize the stuff you used to do, but be specific about the things that you were going through, because those specifics are what's important to the person listening to your testimony. And so what was my life like before Jesus? This is where I'll tell you a little bit about me and kind of my quick little testimony is, I grew up not having much of a church background. And so going through school, I'm sure most like other middle schoolers and high schools, I put a ton of pressure on myself in general. And I always struggled with wanting to be popular. And you can admit whether you want to be popular or not, but looking back now, I definitely can see I wanted to be popular. And so I tried to do the things that were popular, but I didn't really fit in with a lot of the popular people because I didn't play the big 3 sports. I didn't play football, I didn't play baseball, and I didn't play basketball. And pretty much at my school, if you didn't do one of those 3, you weren't in the cool guy club. That's all there was to it. And so, but one place I could kind of hang out with those guys was partying. I could definitely party as hard as all the football, basketball, and baseball players. And so that was kind of how I found my way to kind of be accepted by them, was kind of through that. And then after high school, I kind of started filling my, need for being popular or whatever with material things, and really what I focused on was fixing up cars. I had a really nice car. I had a fancy car that was like in a magazine and all this stuff, and so I really focused a lot of time on having a nice car and driving a nice car, and because now that I look back on it, that was still me trying to be popular. I wanted to pull up to a stoplight and impress somebody I'd never met before by the cool ride I was driving, which sounds completely ridiculous now that I say it out loud, but that's really where I was at that time. And so I definitely made some bad decisions financially and other things along that route, trying to be popular by having nice stuff, but that's kind of the path I was on. So we'll kind of conclude that in a second. Point number 2 on your outline. What made me give Jesus control? We're in church. Jesus is the answer. Number 2, Jesus. So I want to be clear on one point. And so, and this may get a little touchy, and I'm sorry if it does, but I want to be clear on this one. Your testimony has to include Jesus. It has to include Jesus. And I see this all the time, especially in the South. It's so great. Whenever an athlete or a superstar, Hollywood star, whatever, gets up and has an award speech or anything, and they thank God, everybody goes crazy. It's like, oh, that guy's religious. He's preaching the gospel because he thanked God in his award speech. Isn't that awesome? That guy must be an awesome Christian. He thanked God. Well, honestly, if you look at it in the context, that guy doesn't have to be Christian. That girl doesn't have to be Christian. Every religion refers to their deity as a god. That doesn't mean they're talking about the same God I'm talking about. So they could be all sorts of different religions like Muslim or anything in between, and they're talking about God. That's not the same God I'm talking about. So when you're giving your testimony, you need to be very specific that you're talking about Jesus, not just God. And it's really kind of a weird thing, because especially in the South, if you talk about God, people are like, everybody talks about God in the South. It's like pretty common. But when you start talking about Jesus, you might feel some tension. There's some tension if you start bringing up the name of Jesus with people. And you know why? Because Jesus is personal. Now we're not just talking about some God that everybody kind of talks about a God. Now we're talking about Jesus. We're talking about the Jesus. And that's very personal, and it's important that you include that in there. Jesus himself said in John 14:6, everybody know this one? I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is the only way. So you have to talk about Jesus in your testimony. So what happened in your life that made you give Jesus control? Was it a specific moment? Was it something that happened that God talked to you? Maybe you felt his presence when you were at worship service, or maybe you were at camp, or maybe a friend talked to you. Maybe it just hit you one day. Whatever it is, what was that specific thing that happened that you encountered Jesus? Because everybody has a different way of remembering that moment. I talked to so many of you. You can give me specific detail of exactly when you decided that you needed to follow Christ and what that date was and exactly what was going on. Everybody's story is different. The big thing is you need to be proud of your story. No matter what that is, you need to be proud of that. And so my story of meeting Jesus, as far as I'm concerned, isn't real fancy or elaborate or dramatic like a lot of people have. Mine seems, almost boring in comparison sometimes. And so I started coming to church when we moved to Georgia about 10 years ago now with my wife. And she used to go to church when she was a teenager. And so when we came out here, she's like, we're going to start going to church. And I'm like, hey, whatever. Well, at the time, I actually considered myself an atheist. I actually would kind of talk bad about people that believed in God and Jesus. And so I not only was I not sure if there was a God, I definitely said there definitely was not. So but I was like, happy wife, happy life. So I'm like, I'll go with my wife to church because they're not gonna brainwash me while I'm there, and so everything will be fine. And so I just came to Stockbridge Community Church with my wife to make her happy. And then I met all these guys here. There was like 3 or 4 key guys here that I met that completely changed my thoughts on religion. I mean, completely changed my thoughts on religion. And so what I really learned was that it was okay to not be okay. I mean, these guys seemed like, they didn't pretend they had it all together. They talked about their struggles and things they were dealing with. And so, I found out I could be a mess and still be a Christian. I found out I could still be struggling with sin and still be a Christian. And I found out that, I could have fun and still be a Christian. Wow, who would have thought you could still have fun and be a Christian? But I didn't realize that, but man, I was impressed I got to have fun and be a Christian. And so one day, I don't even remember the day, or all of a sudden it just occurred to me that I believed. And that I needed Jesus, and I don't remember me, specifically getting down on one knee and doing my prayer or anything crazy like that, but I definitely, said the sinner's prayer to myself, and next thing I know, I could definitely feel that Jesus was working in me, and so I told Pastor Jeff, hey, I was thinking about getting baptized. And next thing I know, boom, I'm in the tub getting baptized, and that was kind of the end of the story. That was kind of how I came to Jesus. There was no moment in time that it just happened. And so everybody has a different one. You may have that specific moment, or maybe you're like me, it just kind of gradually happened, and you've been coming for a while, and next thing you know, you're like, you know what, I used to doubt all that stuff, and now I believe that in my heart. That's weird. Well, I guess it just happened, And so don't feel like you have to have this specific moment in time that it just happened to you, especially if you've been in church your whole life, because I know a lot of you have been here your whole life, and so it doesn't have to be this big, fancy moment. So, number 3 of how to write your testimony and how to have your testimony. Anybody have an idea what the answer is? That's right. Why is my life different with Jesus? Jesus. I tried to make the answers fairly easy this week for you guys. I know you're out of school. You've switched off your mind for the summer. I tried to make it real easy. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So why is your life different with Jesus? So what has happened? Has your attitude changed? Have your priorities changed? What motivates you now? Are different things motivating you? Are you still struggling with things? It's okay to talk about that. Has Jesus' forgiveness really impacted you? Were you struggling with something and now maybe His forgiveness has impacted you? Those are the things you want to talk about when you're giving your testimony, is tell people what your life is like now compared to what it was. And often when I'm talking to your parents, and I'm going to rat on myself here, if parents come up to me and you've been coming to church for a little while here, and they're like, oh, hi, I'm so-and-so's, I'm Hannah's mom, and I say that because there's 37 Hannahs. I am Hannah's mom, and she's talked about you, blah, 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 or maybe she's never mentioned my name before. And usually I ask is, have you noticed anything different about Hannah since she started coming to church? You know what? Your parents almost always do. Isn't that neat? They're like, yeah, now that you mention it, Hannah doesn't talk back to me nearly as much as she used to, or Hannah actually does the dishes every once in a while, or whatever it is. And that's the moment I'm looking for. What is different now that you have Jesus in your life? What is that different thing? And I'm hoping that your parents can tell me what it is, because they know you a lot better than I do. And so, let's talk about my life. My life after Jesus. Wow, what a difference. I was definitely on a path to nowhere land other than having an awesome wife. But now, what a huge difference. And so I'm blessed in so many ways. When I started to kind of write this down, I had to scratch out a lot of things because I didn't want to bore you guys with all this stuff that I think is fantastic. But one thing is, I definitely don't feel like I seek popularity from others like I used to. I mean, I'm not out there kind of trying to be famous or anything crazy like that. My daughter definitely has more Twitter followers than I do. And so, it's not like I'm trying to be popular or anything cool like that. I just don't seek that anymore. And so for me, that's a huge change. I definitely don't party like I used to. I have fun at parties, but it's a totally different type of party. It's a pool party with my kids and her crazy friends. And so, just totally different. I've definitely surrounded myself with godly friends who lift me up when I need the help, and they're there to correct me if I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. I have those people that can kind of do that for me. I've been able to change people's lives. I've taught financial peace at this church for many years and watched people change their life by changing the way they spend their money and save their money. And so that's been a huge thing that I see as an impact. It's been cool. I got to be in this youth ministry for like 7 years now. And I'm sure I may have changed at least one teenager's life during that 7 years. And so that's awesome. I'm happy about that. God rewarded me last year with my absolute dream job working at Triumph Motorcycles. I didn't even try to look for this job. It just kind of showed up in my lap because God just said, hey, you've been good, here you go, which is awesome. And then obviously I have a terrific family with my wife Tawny, my daughter Stacia, and my other daughter Carly. And so to say Jesus has changed my life and made my life better is a total understatement. Things are so much better now that I have Jesus in my life. And so the three things you got to remember as you're writing your testimony, and this is what I'm going to challenge you to do tonight, is sometime soon sit down and start writing or thinking about your testimony. So the three things you need to remember is, what was my life like before Jesus? What made me give Jesus control? And why is my life different after Jesus? Three very simple things, right? Before, during, after. Very easy, even for the kids that don't like English. Very easy. So, have you ever heard the saying, preach the gospel every day, and if necessary, use words? Raise your hand if you've heard that saying. Anybody heard that saying? Preach the gospel every day, if necessary, use words. I used to say that, actually. I thought, that's a great thing to say, because your actions really speak for you, and people are like, oh, look how good he is, and so, you don't even have to preach about it. You can just act like a good Christian, and people are impressed, and all that, but I don't think that's true anymore. I've changed my thoughts on that one, and the reason is, in order to preach the gospel of Jesus, you actually have to use words. You can't say, let my actions do that for me. Now, yes, you can, get people to maybe ask you questions because of the way you act. If you're acting different, they're like, wow, what's changed in you? But if I'm acting different, and then Joel comes up to me and says, wow, Brent, I noticed you're acting different. What's changed in you? And I just go, I don't know. Well, that's not really helping anybody come to Christ, is it? But if I don't know. Or I sit here quietly. I mean, that's not really helping, the story of my testimony. So I have to use the words. I have to preach about Jesus. Romans 10:14 says very specifically, how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? I want to read that one more time, but we need to make it a little more specific because it may not, Paul wasn't really specific in that one, but I want to make it real specific. But how can they call on Jesus to save them unless they believe in Jesus? And how can they believe in Jesus if they've never heard about Jesus? And how can they hear about Jesus unless someone tells them? You have to tell them. You have to share that with somebody. It's right there. It's the only chance you get. So, you know what's awesome about your testimony? You may not think your testimony is awesome, but your testimony is meant for at least one person to hear. There's at least one person out there that needs to hear what you have to say. And you may not know who that person is, and you may have to give your testimony 3,700 times before that one person finally hears it that needed to hear it, but it's worth it. It's worth taking that chance and talking to that many people and tell them your testimony because at least one person needs to hear it. So maybe tonight your story, what's your story? Maybe tonight your story is your parents went through an ugly divorce. It's totally wrecked you. You know what? Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but maybe 5 years from now, you're going to need to tell a story to somebody about how going through a divorce with your parents hurt you, but Jesus made it better. Or through Jesus, you were able to get through that divorce, whatever it is. Whatever that story is. Maybe you dealt with abuse in your house. And I know that's a terrible statistic that I hear nowadays about how many kids are getting abused. Maybe you dealt with abuse. Maybe right now there's somebody sitting next to you that needs to hear your story because you're dealing with the exact same thing. You need to share your story with those people because it makes a difference. And what if maybe you're one of those people that you think, you know what, my testimony is kind of boring because I grew up in church, I've been doing this church thing my whole life, I don't really feel like I have a testimony because there's not really a cool before story. You know who I think your testimony's for? I think your testimony's for people that grew up in church and they've been doing it their whole life, and maybe they've just kind of given up. Maybe they've just stopped, but they're still going through the motions. Maybe they need to hear your story so they can get that fire relit in them by Jesus again. Maybe that's the person that needs to hear it. So don't think your testimony is useless or boring just because it's not as exciting as some of the ones you hear out there. Your testimony is meant for someone. Doesn't matter what your story is. So, tonight, if you don't have an awesome testimony, maybe it's because you're not sure about this whole Jesus thing. Maybe I've been up here talking, you're like, okay, you mentioned Jesus a lot. I didn't know that was going to happen here. Maybe you have a great first part of your testimony, and now you really need that second half, which is the part about when you met Jesus. Maybe that's the part you're waiting for, is that next part. And tonight I'm going to give you that opportunity here in a little bit when we pray. But tonight, if you don't know Jesus and you're like, man, things sound better with that Jesus guy, I might give that a try. Tonight's your night that you can give that a try. So, tonight's next steps, if you guys look on your connection card there. First one is, invite Jesus into my life for the very first time so I can share a testimony. In a few minutes here when I get ready to pray, you can go ahead, just bow your head right where you're at, and all you have to do is say, Jesus, come be the Lord of my life. And if you believe that completely in your heart, He'll come into your life and your life will be changed right now, tonight. So if that's the step you need to take, tonight's the night you can do that. The other next step maybe you can take tonight is maybe you need to write your testimony. I know it's summer, you don't want to get near a piece of paper or pencil or, this is something you can do in 140 characters or less maybe, I don't know. You can make it as a personal challenge. But you need to write your testimony. You don't have to tell anybody about it. You don't have to start sharing it with people. Just sit down and write it down. Maybe it'll feel good just to write it all down, and maybe you'll start to realize how great your life is since you met Jesus. And maybe you'll uncover some stuff from your past you didn't even realize was a problem, like I've done through writing my testimony. Maybe that's what you need to do as your next step tonight, is write your testimony. The third thing is, next Saturday, our church is going to go out into the community and try to change people's lives to give them an opportunity for a better life. So if you show up here at the church next Saturday at 9 a.m., we're going to go hand out these awesome, huge God on film flyers all over the community, on cars, on mailboxes, on doorknobs, whatever it takes. We are going to go out and just plaster these things on every person we can find, because we believe there's an opportunity for a better life here at SCC. If we can get people to come here, their life will be changed. So, if you're interested in doing that, you can check that box. Somebody will probably be reaching out to you, but you just show up here at 9 o'clock next Saturday. And you can go out and make a difference on somebody. What a great way to share your faith with somebody by giving them an invite to church with a huge group of your friends, so it's not intimidating. So as we get ready to pray, I wanted to say a special prayer tonight. One of our students that comes here once in a while, Jonas Ray, was in a motorcycle accident this week. And so we just want to pray for him. He's up in Scottish Rite. And I don't know all the details, but I just know God can do great things. So we definitely need to pray for him. So if you guys will bow your head in prayer, we'll go Lord in prayer. God, thank you for tonight that we can just talk openly about our testimony. God, you know you've done things in our life, God, because we needed it to happen, God, so we have the story to tell. And whether we have huge dramatic things that happen in our life, God, for our story, or maybe it feels like nothing has happened, God. We have a story to tell, and we know you want us to share that with somebody else. And God, there were some decisions made tonight, God, and I know somebody just decided to make you the Lord of their life tonight, God, and God, I'm just so thankful for that. I just feel that in the room tonight, and I'm just so thankful for that, God, that lives are being changed here tonight. And God, for